And then they reached out to me and they were like, well, the comp soup is happy with you and he wants you to come along on the next project. So I'm like, oh, cool. What's the next project? And then Spider-Man. And I'm like,
Oh, great. Yeah. That's actually a good thing because, anyways, you'll see why. Okay. All right. Hey, everybody. It's Cameron here, and Kevin's with me, as you can see. And we have a guest today, so it's not just Kevin and I, talking at each other for another episode. It's episode 7 of Framework, the last podcast about film. We're actually available on Stitcher. Which is kind of cool because I didn't know that thing existed. It's kind of interesting. Today's an exciting episode. We're going to hopefully keep our episode to about an hour. Our guest he's an amazing guy, and he does some really excellent work. So I think you're going to learn a lot about this particular part of the industry, and that part of the industry that we're going to look at today is visual effects. We're going to use a recent release, Marvel's recent release, Spider-Man No Way Home, came out on December 17th, I think. It's written by Chris McKenna, Eric Sommers, directed by John Watts. So we've got a friend of mine on the podcast, Elmo, Mr. Elmoatasem. He's
Hello.
a good friend of mine. Hi, Elmo. He's a good friend of mine. We met in film school. I think the first year was 2015. So, I've known you for about 6 years, I would say is probably the most accurate. I've known you for about 6 years. We've had a history we've done some projects together. You're talented. You're known in our circles as the Egyptian magician. I don't know if that's translated into, where you are now and in your workplace. Maybe not, because there's lots of magicians over there at SPI, right? Yeah. So that's awesome. But I won't take away your opportunity to introduce yourself. So Elmo, tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell the audience a bit about yourself. And I'll give you some time to do that.
Cool. Hello, I'm Elmo. I am a visual effects compositor. So my brother likes to put it simply in that I do Photoshop for video. Basically, I make things that don't usually mesh together so that they look like they're one thing, if that makes sense. We'll go deeper into it as we go. But yeah. I was born in Egypt. I'm Egyptian Canadian and 24 years old. Yeah. And I work at Sony Imageworks. I worked on Spider-Man No Way Home as well. So yeah, we'll get some inside information on that.
Yeah, that's the lead. That you almost buried the lead there. Yeah. We are the same age. Yeah. You're currently in Vancouver working at Sony Pictures Imageworks. I have the visual effects supervisor I have here from IMDb. I'm going to botch the name. I just took the one from Sony Pictures Imageworks, Chris, right? That's the guy, Chris Wagner or Wagner. Wagner, yeah. So that's the visual effects supervisor. But it's funny because we looked on IMDb and there's like 15 or 30 of them. It's like there's a bunch, right? Because there's a bunch of companies. And Marvel has their own visual effects supervisor because that was probably the person who was on set, right? I would imagine. I think it's the person that's on set, and it's also the overall visual effects supervisor. Yeah. So each of those that you mentioned that are listed on IMDb are supervising all the departments within each studio. Yeah. And then the visual effects supervisor on the client side, so on Marvel's side, is kind of overlooking all the different studios at the same time. Yeah, see, that's such an interesting thing to me. My mind is blown when I see how many people work on these movies, and I think it's something like 1,600 people worked on this movie. It had a $200 million budget. In the opening weekend, it made $260 million. So that's
whoa.
That's they made their budget back in 72 hours. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
And worldwide, up until today, which is the date of recording, which is February 12th, it made $1.7 billion worldwide. So that is a successful movie. It's the third movie in the John Watts Spider-Man trilogy, which, as far as we know, is concluded. Yeah, Mr. Kevin over there,
what?
Kevin Feige or Feige or Feige.
I've heard many different
I still don't know
ways.
how to pronounce his
I hear
name.
most people pronounce it as Kevin Feige.
Feige. Kevin Feige's doing
Feige.
really well for himself.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I think Kevin Feige makes 82 cents a second.
Whoa.
Quick fact check that. So that's about $26 million a year. So that's a pretty. So I mean, we're falling into the trap of looking at a movie as being successful because of how much money it's making, but that's not necessarily the only way to look at it. But again, that's not what we're going to talk about. It's just an interesting introduction to the movie because it was incredible. It was a spectacle. I watched it. Kevin and I watched it together. Yeah, so I guess, tell us a bit more about Sony Pictures, Sony Imageworks in Vancouver. How big is it? What is it? What is your, daily routine like? Do you go into the office? Are you remote? Like what? Just tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, so Sony Imageworks is a pretty big studio here in Vancouver. They have an LA branch and they're opening up in Montreal as well. Like they have artists working from Montreal right now. When I joined, it was a team of 600 people, 600 plus. The last number I heard was 700 plus, something like that. And yeah, we have like, we take everything, like we do some previs. We have everything from like modeling to like compositing and packaging everything. So we're a full vendor. And the way it's worked for me as a compositor is we like to keep shots within like the same people who are familiar with the shots. So in other studios, for example, you would have situations where you would work on a shot, submit a version, and then someone else might pick up that same shot afterwards after you've moved on to something else. But for me, how it's worked for me is if I have a shot, I'll take it from like the beginning sections of bashing it together, getting a first look together with all the elements that are there then, and then back and forth doing notes. Basically, I'd submit shots and shot updates as I get elements to work with. Like the elements could be effects, dust simulations, or a lighting render of a character running and doing something, or an environment render, or matte painting for the backgrounds. There's a lot of variety of what kind of elements we would get. And then I bring them all together, and it's an iterative process. So first I do like a bash. So quickly put together something with all the elements, see where everything sits, if anything's missing. And then we get a first look. So that's with everything more balanced together. But like the edges don't have to be perfect, and there's room for improvement in the integration. But it's kind of setting the tone basically of the shot, or where we want everything to be, what we want the general color palette to be, that kind of thing. And then after the first look, we do versions of, this is an update with like making it kind of work. And then the client might come back to us being like, the background pole there is too red. Can we back off on that? Can we rebalance it in this way? Can we remove this, add this? Like the note, whatever the notes might be, I take that, make it work with the elements, and then we basically aim to get a studio final or approval, like creative approval. So creative approval means, okay, the shot is in a good spot. Now we make sure it's technically correct, and on a technical level, everything is perfect. Right. And that's the next step of quality control and creating mats for color correction to then use if they want to color correct things differently. They have mats for that so that they can isolate. So that's created during quality control. And then it's submitted for final and approved. Sometimes it's unfinaled. Sometimes things happen. But yeah, that's generally the process of like the life of a shot from
right.
when it lands on my desk.
Yeah, and you're talking about modeling to compositing and previs and all that stuff. And so you're for some of the audience members who might not know what you're talking about, that's kind of like the general, what you're referring to as a general visual effects pipeline, is who it goes to first, and then it comes to you sort of last, right? I mean, like the compositor doesn't get there first, so to speak, right? So that's actually part of what I did want to ask you about, which I'm curious about too. This is not something that, we've really gone into in depth about. Is just describe, just for in layman's terms, like describe the pipeline. Before we go into that, let's just clarify a couple things. When you say vendor, you're talking about Sony Pictures Imageworks, and when you say client, you're talking about Marvel. So Marvel being the primary production company, and so they're the client. So they're making all of the creative decisions. So when you say send for notes, it kind of goes up the hierarchy, and then from somebody at Sony, it'll be sent over to Marvel. And Marvel will look at it, and somebody at Marvel will approve it or creatively approve it, is basically what you're saying, right?
Yeah, it kind of goes through multiple hierarchies in a way. There's the hierarchy within Imageworks itself.
Right.
It
doesn't go from you to Mr. Kevin over there. Yeah.
There's like me, the compositing supervisor, then the visual effects supervisor within our studio, and then there is then it goes on to the visual effects supervisor. The editor gets to look at it, or editors. And like all the people in the studio heads, and producers, and like everyone like who's affiliated with it on a managerial level kind of gets to look at it.
So there's like 71 or 73 companies, and a lot of those companies are the visual effects companies, and so how does the work get divided? Like, does Sony, I would imagine, gets the biggest chunk of the film. But you were saying like Sony is a vendor that is a full process vendor, but so does that mean that there are other vendors who focus on maybe just compositing, and they'll focus on a sequence from the film, but just from a compositing standpoint?
Yeah. So basically how it works within visual effects in general is you have the movie, you cut it up into sequences, basically like you can think of it as like beats or like beat sections. Those sequences are then displayed for visual effects, for all the visual effects vendors. And then there's a bidding process. So each vendor bids, this sequence has 300 shots. I can do that within this amount of time for this amount of money. And they calculate it based on their resources, their artists, and their specialties.
Right. Are all 700 people at SPI working on No Way Home?
No. No.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
But we were a pretty big team. Like our compositing team alone was at its peak was 50 something people.
Yeah, I know. There's a lot of names in the credits of that movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're sort of like, put it on 3 columns. We want to see the post-credit scene. Come on, hurry up. So before we got deeper into the discussion about the pipeline and more about your involvement in No Way Home, I want to this is a question I have for you. You were able to see the last episode where we talked about movies in 2021 and 2022 and what's coming up and what we're looking forward to. And in that episode, we Kevin and I wouldn't call it a debate because we didn't debate each other, but because we didn't disagree too much. Usually when you say debate, you're inferring disagreement, but or on some level. So we had a discussion about subtitles, captions and subtitles, which are different, are technically different. But we had a discussion. In the discussion, we were referring to subtitles. So if for somebody listening who doesn't know what we were talking about, Kevin and I are both anti-subtitle if the environment is suits. So for example, right, if the movie's in English and it's mixed properly and there's no accessibility reason why we would have subtitles or captions, then our opinion is subtitles take away from the enjoyment of the movie. And I said in a couple of aggressive ways, if you want to read, get a book kind of thing. But we really, our intention for this, for the next few episodes of Framework at least, is to ask our guests where they stand in subtitles. Do you watch with subtitles? Do you not watch with subtitles? Are you indifferent? If you have a strong-ish opinion on subtitles, why do you have that opinion? So, in a short answer, we're curious to know, where does Elmo stand in the subtitle debate?
I don't have a strong opinion about subtitles. I think they have a lot of use when the situation is not perfect.
Right.
Like you were mentioning last time in the last episode, how like if the audio's too low and you're not able to like increase it, or the mix is hard to distinguish, right, or that kind of thing. Or even in my case, most of the time it's when it's a foreign film. So in those situations, I would be completely left without an understanding of what's happening.
Absolutely.
And I would definitely prefer in those cases to have subtitles on than to have a dubbed version of whatever I'm watching if it's a foreign film.
Yeah, there's a different debate, like a subcategory of debate, which is subtitles versus dubbed, subs versus dubs, or subtitles versus dubbed audio. And that I would say that is a separate debate. Like this is just, like, are you as anti subtitle as I am? Like I'm not, if it's a foreign film, I don't want my opinion or Red Curtain Entertainment's opinion to discourage people from watching foreign films, because I think you should. And in which case, unless you speak the language of the foreign film, you'll need subtitles. There are some examples, however, and this is partly because of my exposure to French, with French television, where the writing and the acting is done in a way, and I guess in a way the writing and the acting and the directing is done in a way where, and French is a very emotional language. You can get the point even if you're not even if you don't have subtitles on, but that, there's no disagreement. But just having them on, even in those situations, even although they're necessary, takes away from the experience because you're splitting your attention. So that's I definitely thought you weren't going to have a strong opinion because I think we might have talked about it before.
We definitely did, yeah.
Yeah, but that's I think I want it to be sort of a through line in the next couple of episodes. Just ask people, ideally we'll ask people until we find somebody who puts subtitles on every time.
I like it. No, I like that it's like a nice little constant in the episodes.
Yeah, because they're getting so different, right? I mean, we talked about insurance, we talked about cinematography, we're talking about visual effects, we talked about Scott Pilgrim, which was sort of from a visual story breaking perspective and visual
You're
effects
going all
perspective.
over the place.
What do you mean?
No,
in terms of the show, yeah. So the framework's changing a lot. So we just wanted to have something that was consistent, and aside from the format, which is we're going to have a guest on almost every episode. So we can get back into kind of the No Way Home aspect of it, but I wanted to stop for a second and ask you about that. So, because I think it's interesting, hopefully a fun discussion for people in the comment section if they want to do that. Okay, No Way Home. So at the beginning you said you're a compositor, and you told us that it's your brother simplifies it by calling it Photoshop for video, which is actually, for people like myself or people who might not know what compositing is beyond what they've heard you say already, it's kind of a neat way of looking at it in a way, because it distills it down to a level of understanding.
I like how people actually refer to VFX as Photoshop, like compositing as Photoshop.
Yeah,
people who don't know, they call it Photoshop.
Yeah, that's Photoshop. Yeah.
And it's
true. No Way Home.
Yeah,
even like Andrew Garfield, when he was talking about the leak as being Photoshop.
Yeah, they call it Photoshop.
Oh no, that's not. That's fake. Yeah,
that's fake.
Yeah.
So tell us a bit more about your job and who you and the people you work with. Is it very is compositing, not the whole visual effects pipeline, but is compositing itself a solo thing, or are there more than one compositors? How many compositors did you have for No Way Home? So tell us about that aspect of it, for specifically in the No Way Home instance.
In the No Way Home instance, we basically had a team of 50 plus, the maximum. It kind of fluctuated as the project began and ended. It's kind of like a curve.
They add people as you go, or
they add people as we go, and then people start going away as we start hitting the last couple deliveries. Because then some people even continue working on it after the movie gets released, to work on marketing material or to work on additional stuff that the client wants, and it's different per project.
Sorry, what were you going to say? You were going to say something?
Well, no, it's just interesting because I wonder if they do update any shots after the release, because I remember seeing I think it was Endgame or Infinity War, and there was one shot where when I watched it in theater, and there was one shot where I don't know, it looked like the key wasn't really good for with the hair and I noticed that in theaters, but then I couldn't find it anymore. It was gone when it was released.
Interesting.
I mean,
sometimes they do go in and change things.
With things like keying and enhancing environments and compositing and stuff like that, if the general audience is not going to notice the change, how could you go wrong? You know, like it's not like you're taking an actor out after a week of release.
Yeah, no, it is interesting, and it doesn't happen too often. Like a lot of mistakes still like go through and like are released in the DVD versions and Blu-ray versions because the artists working on them are just like, okay, we're done, we're gone, and it's not important enough or big enough that they want to go back into it and dig things up and try to fix them. So it's not like a super common thing, I don't think, but it does happen.
Yeah. So I'm going to pivot a little bit. So with compositing, you know, and with a movie like No Way Home, right? With a studio movie in general, perhaps at some point in the process, they're going to commit to a release date. So they're going to say Christmas, or they're going to commit to a release date. So when that happens, right, how would you say your experience in the pipeline, that late in the pipeline, changes? Is it because I imagine there's a lot of work hours, and I imagine it's really stressful. And then my sub question to that is, how much pressure do you feel knowing that, you know, millions of people are going to see your work on a big screen?
Yeah, so there's a bit to unpack there. And so,
for sure,
like you said,
for sure.
My job is definitely at the very end of the pipeline. Nothing happens after compositing in terms of us as a vendor, other than it then goes through like color grading and even the sound department is kind of working in conjunction or at the same time with the visual effects studios, from my understanding. So it's not really anyone waiting on us. And even when we finish a shot, the color correction and grading isn't like all of a sudden started once the shot is finished. It's already been like dialed in a sense. And then our work is kind of like, when we work on a shot, we try to maintain as much of the plate as possible, even its values, even if the plate has like inconsistencies, we want to keep it as close to the plate as possible, because then the color correction people or the color people in general can work with the plate and then take our additions as additions, not as complete changes.
That's really interesting, because when you know, from my perspective, it almost feels like color would play a big role in the actual blending and compositing of a shot. So, you know, there must be a process. When you say plate, just to clarify for some audience members who might not know what you're talking about, what does that term mean?
So plate is the principal photography. Basically, whatever came out of the camera, that is the plate we're working with. And we won't get too complicated with like
that's
color
fine.
conversions and color spaces and stuff. Yeah. But yeah, essentially what hits the sensor of the camera, that image is the plate.
That's what you start with. In the simplest
form. Yeah. What you start with, and in a lot of cases, there is blue screen or green screen in it. So they shoot in front of like blue or green or like some form of that. And in some instances, they shoot like in normal streets and normal buildings. And then our job is to extend it and make it feel grander than it is, or make it make basically the location its own character and its own thing that helps you just like sink into the visuals. So yeah, there's a couple of versions of what that could look like, but essentially the plate is whatever comes from the camera. And you're right, color plays a huge role in blending things together and making things work. But the thing is, to blend colors together and to make them work, you don't need to change the plate. You can match things to the plate. So you don't need to, like, sometimes you do need to, but what we try to do as much as possible is stick as close to the plate as possible. And then whatever it is that is added onto it or behind it or integrate it into it in any way is kind of matched to the plate so that you have a ground truth of, like, this is what we want to achieve, kind of thing. And there is a LUT basically that is attached to every plate. So each plate has a LUT of how generally it should be balanced. And you have that on as you work, kind of thing. So you're balancing to something. It's not.
So it's not. Yeah, you're not working blind.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. So let's talk about the pressure, because as somebody who doesn't work, who has not worked on a $200 million production, I can only imagine the kind of pressure. And I mean, I know that there's, it maybe, I'll let you answer, but there's 1,600 people. You're not the only person obviously doing this movie. There's a bunch of, there's over 1,000 people working on this movie. So they all definitely feel some sense of pressure. But what kind of pressure do you feel being at the end of the pipeline, and being part of that team of people whose work, whether they know it or not, people are going to see on the screen?
It's a lot of pressure. There's a lot that rides into our job, especially coming at the end of the pipeline. Basically, any mistake that happened along the way, we're responsible for fixing. We're responsible for making sure everything looks okay. And if one thing like messed up along the way, a lot of the time, because of the time crunch and because of the deadline and because we're at the end, so we're closest to when the movie is released, it's much more feasible and efficient and realistic for us to fix it than to send it back to where the mistake happened and then have it flow through the pipeline again. So there's a lot that comes into the pressure, and especially with delays, because delays are kind of like a reality of a project like this.
Are you working all from home, or do you go into the studio?
So it fluctuated throughout the project.
It changes from project to project?
It does. But even throughout the one project of No Way Home, I started off working completely from home. Then a couple months in, I started doing a hybrid. So going into the office 2 days of the week, and then working from home the rest. And I was fortunate, like very fortunate to be able to do that, actually, because working from home is actually very productive for me. I find it very efficient and very effective in terms of the work itself. But the biggest part that's missing from it is the social aspect. So going into a hybrid situation, like going into the studio a couple of days a week, helps a lot with that. And you get to actually interact with people, get to actually let's get lunch together. Before that point, all my interactions with my team members were through work. So you miss a lot of the social aspect of it. And I had known these people for a year at that point, but without knowing them, Yeah. So
just like, just through a Teams chat or something, whatever it is that you're working through. Yeah. What is the average timeline like for a movie like No Way Home? Or you also worked on Falcon and the Winter Soldier, right?
Yeah.
That was a TV show, right?
Yeah. Well,
yeah, it was a TV show.
I'm not caught up. I just got Disney Plus yesterday. Okay. So, sorry.
No excuses, Cameron.
Yeah, I know. No excuses. So I'm not caught up yet. So, anyway, so what's the timeline like on a big studio movie like No Way Home versus the timeline on a big studio television show like Falcon and the Winter Soldier?
The timeline looked kind of similar. Keep in mind with Falcon and the Winter Soldier, I joined in the last 3 months. So I joined when it was already in crunch time and like,
nice introduction.
Yeah.
Nice introduction.
When I talk about
visual effects.
like, for us, thankfully it's more artist driven. So we know our targets. We know what we need to finish. We know how fast the shot is going, and we know the deadline or the when we're expected to deliver the shot. So I can be like, today I got the shot this far, and we need to send it an update to the client in 2 days. So I'll probably need to work some overtime. So you put in a request. So it's not asked of you, you're more asking for it so that you can make things flow. And I like how it works like that, because artists can actually balance things out and regulate themselves. And as long as there's trust in like both directions, it works beautifully.
Well, it's interesting. They put some trust in their employees and their artists. And that's really good to see, because a lot of companies don't think about it that way. In terms of days or in terms of months, how long did No Way Home take? Was it a 3, 4, 5 month process?
I was on it for 6 months.
You were on it for 6.
And I wasn't at the very beginning of it or anything. Like I was pretty early on when I hopped on the project. But before that point, there was a lot of pre-production. There was a lot of preparation. There was look development to kind of get everything looking the best it can look. There is a lot of the chunk of modeling and creating the characters and the environments and stuff. So when I joined, which was 6 months away from the release, we already had like a couple of shots of hero shots, kind of like establishing the look and what we're trying to aim for. But only a few, like 5 or 6. And then you have like a lot of the assets that is being lit and then coming to you to composite. So yeah, the project before my point, I'm not sure how long they were on it. Definitely several months, but I don't know exactly in terms of like the timeline.
It's interesting because in this particular movie, there are characters who are like, I don't want to spoil anything, but there are characters who are pretty much entirely visual effects.
Yeah.
And also transformations that are heavy in visual effects and how they are done. And go ahead.
And there's more characters that are entirely or almost entirely visual effects than you'd think too. Like one of the biggest things was Tom's Spider-Man, or the main Spider-Man, let's say, like his.
All 3 Spider-Mans come into this. Whatever.
Okay,
just say
if you're listening to this,
it's already 2 months. If you're listening to this and you haven't seen the movie, you're too far anyways. I'm really curious to know what your favorite part of the job is. What your experience was, positive, negative, neutral on No Way Home. Was it really exciting to work on the movie? And what's your least favorite part about the job? So start with your favorite. Start with your favorite part. And then do your least favorite.
This was such an incredible experience to even be a part of. It was my first. It is my first feature film. It's my first like big screen release. It's a lot of firsts for me, and it represents like a big journey that came beforehand to get to it. And the fact that it's Spider-Man 2 and such a love letter to Spider-Man as a character, that meant a lot. And it took a lot of processing to even like understand, hey, this is happening, this is real. And I'm actually doing this, like pinching myself. When I first heard about it too, I kind of had to process it, like sit down for like 15 minutes and just process the fact that, at that point, I didn't know if like I was going to continue working on a following Imageworks project or not. I was just on Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and I had 1 month left of my contract. And I was like, ooh, maybe I should like start looking at different studios, start applying more. And then they reached out to me and they were like, well, the Comp Soup is happy with you and he wants you to come along on the next project. So I'm like, oh, cool. What's the next project? And then Spider-Man. And I'm like, so it took me like 15 minutes of just like, just processing it. And it meant so much to me. And my favorite part of it was actually getting to like work on it in a very tangible sense, and work on the characters that I grew up with. Like actually getting to see the three of them on the screen at the same time and getting to like fix things and do visual effects that I didn't know how they did it the first time. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's how they did it. And I'm doing it. So it was kind of a surreal experience and kind of very, very interesting, very cool. Super inspiring, I was super excited about it. My least favorite part is also related to the excitement because you can't talk about it. You can't express it. It's all like bottled up inside and nothing about it you could talk about during those 6 months. So that was my least favorite part of it. If you put that alongside of not working with my coworkers in the same place, working from home most of the time, and so you can't even talk to them as much about it in the way that you would be talking about it like excitedly and stuff. So yeah, that was definitely my least favorite part of it, closely followed by the time crunch that we were put in. Yeah.
It's such a crazy thing to know that one of your closest friends from college is working on a movie like that, and how excited I was when I went into the theater and the credits rolled and I was like, okay, I'm not just sitting here for the post-credit scene. I'm sitting here because I'm going to see Elmo's name in a big block of names at the end of the movie. And it's I know it's crazy. It's amazing. So
it's really crazy on this end too.
Yeah, I'm really proud of you. And I want you to know that I'm not the only one who's proud of you. We a lot of people over here in Ontario who saw that movie and are thinking about you, and so good work. At least, Kevin might have been a bit more critical of the visual effects because he's got a bit more experience than I do.
Oh.
I thought the movie was well done.
If you don't notice it, you did a good job.
Yeah. If you didn't notice, I was kind of looking closer at this one, but I thought it was a spectacle.
And from my end, when the credits were rolling, my legs were literally like unstable. They were shaking the whole time. I was like, oh, it's going to happen. I don't know where my name is going to come up. And I almost missed my name the first time. And I actually wanted to watch it with like different people or as many people as I could. So I booked tickets to watch it like 3 times basically in a very short amount of time. So I got to watch it like in different, like with different critical eyes each time. The first time was purely just, okay, let me experience this, see how the audience feels, see how it connects to the rest of the story, because I only knew like what my sequence is. And yeah, it was definitely like an emotional like roller coaster when it was coming up. And it's not perfect.
Did you like notice?
Nowhere. Yeah.
Were you like looking at picking out every shot that you worked on?
Yep. I was picking out every shot I worked on. I was also like noticing things that I would have done differently. Like that's the thing with compositing too, or visual effects in general, is I feel like nothing is really
finished,
unchangeable, or like you'll always have more that you could do.
Yeah, with 10 years of compositing, you can make it perfect or whatever. You know.
Well, you can make it work with 1 or 2 or 3, like it. Whatever your timeline is,
yeah,
you'll find new things that could make the shot better.
With more time, you can make it better. Yeah. And you worked on Sony's contract was the last 35 minutes of the movie or something, the big fight scene, right?
Big fight scene. I don't know. It's not the very last, but it is like a 35-minute.
Was it the one where like they all like
Statue of Liberty?
Yeah, the Statue of Liberty. All 3 of them
Statue of Liberty.
and have to sort of
cure them.
Cure them and get the Spider-Mans back to their universe, which is a big spoiler.
We're too far into it.
Too far into it. Yeah. No, I definitely want to have another episode. Very quickly, tell us a little bit about your high school experience, when you wanted to do visual effects, how that translated into film school, and then how you got to Sony. So what was your pathway, and what kind of pathways are out there for people who want to do what you're doing?
Okay. I'll try to keep it as condensed as can be while still like explaining what it is. I first wanted to do visual effects in middle school. When I first found out what visual effects even is, I was in Egypt at that time, so there wasn't really a career in visual effects on the horizon at any point, but it was like, oh, this is something that's super cool. And my favorite aspect of it is problem solving. As like you're facing so many problems, and you have to be creative in the way you solve those problems. And that was addictive. That to me, if I look back, is one of the things that I love about anything or most things I do. Like I love rock climbing, for example. That's basically just physical problem solving. You have like 2 points and you're problem solving your way through it. So that aspect of it was just addictive. And I just kept doing it in any opportunity that I could throughout middle school, high school, absorbing as much information as I can. There's a lot out there. At that point, I was doing a lot of content from a website called FX PhD. They're really, really good. There's a ton of YouTube channels that I was following that did like YouTube shorts or like tutorials on different things, and I'd try to combine things together and pull things from here, make it like mesh it into something new, which led me then to film school, where I was establishing basically my foundation. I wanted to understand how a camera works better. I wanted to understand how the editing process works, like very in depth. I wanted to understand how the sound process works in great depth, mainly because the sound department and the editing department are the two main departments I'm working simultaneously with as a visual effects artist. So I wanted to know what they're going through, what benefits them, what benefits me, and kind of be able to understand like a common language, and also learning how the camera works, what makes a shot look good, lighting, and all that, those aspects of it. And that was basically my focus during film school. And there wasn't really a strong stream for visual effects. There was like a very weak, 1 year thing that we had. And it's understandable because our program was very young at that point. We were like the third or fourth, I don't even know, the cohorts. But yeah, I didn't really get a lot of formal education from that in terms of visual effects. So that's what took me to the school afterwards, which was Lost Boys Studios. That's in Vancouver. So that instigated my move into Vancouver, basically. And that was a year-long intensive of just compositing, focusing solely on compositing, in all its different aspects, or as many aspects as we can cover. And that, I'd say, is the strongest learning period of my entire life. And it highlighted to me the importance of mentorship, having mentors that actually know what they're doing, know what they're talking about, and have the eye to see what your strengths and weaknesses are, and where you want to go, and how to get you to that point. That those qualities of a mentor were just like expanded in my view in such a way when I went to Lost Boys, because I didn't think mentorship could be that strong or that effective until I actually experienced it myself. And yeah, there's a ton of resources to learn online. But I think actually having like mentorship is the strongest and most effective way, and the best way the information actually sticks and you can expand on it, was mentorship and finding like that connection and that relationship, in my opinion. And yeah, after Lost Boys, I went into Sony, worked on Falcon and the Winter Soldier and Spider-Man. And I'm still with Sony on more projects right now. And yeah, that's basically a rundown of...
On your journey, have you ever, because there's so many roles in VFX, have you ever considered doing other roles, or you only wanted to do compositing?
I've definitely considered it. If I was to do a different role, it would probably be more in the effects simulations kind of world. But I didn't really get a chance to delve too much into 3D. Or like making 3D myself. I'm very very capable in taking 3D renders, and I understand like the workflows of it, but I haven't really done the 3D like modeling, texturing, shading, like doing the shading, doing the rigging, doing the animation. All those aspects of 3D I haven't touched really, or haven't delved too deeply into. And the part that interested me the most from what I haven't delved too deeply into was FX simulations. So like fire, smoke, water, so many different, anything like physics-based.
Sand.
Or
rigid sand,
sand. Yeah, that's it. Lightning.
But yeah, I think compositing was the thing that I was most drawn to. Like the main aspect of it was just the problem solving.
Yeah, that goes back to it goes back to your problem solving thing. And I think with it's just really interesting because I mean every area of this industry needs problem solving, but it's so interesting that it's compositing that you're in and you bring up the problem solving, because it feels like to me they're very analogous in the sense that with compositing you're blending things together, right? And you're making sure that they mesh. And that's the essence of problem solving, right? Is, if there's two things that are in conflict with one another or aren't always two elements that are brought together, you have to do the work to make sure that they can work together. So it works so well that it makes so much sense from that perspective that problem solving is kind of what brought you here. And so thanks for sharing your education experience and your pathway. And I imagine there are multiple pathways. Not everybody has to come from film school necessarily, but Kevin has a similar pathway. Where'd you go? You went Centennial, right?
Yeah.
And you did it was a year, right?
No, it was 2 years. But their VFX program was more of generalist, or they would go into different fields. But compositing was the biggest one because they're also looking to hire people. Like the professors are always looking to hire people, and they usually hire a lot of compositors. So. So
as teacher assistants kind of thing.
Well, the people who worked there were also working. I mean, the teachers were working. So you can tell they were asking questions of what we wanted to do in life and stuff like that. They were just kind of it was like a job interview. It's a 2-year job interview.
A 2-year job.
Yeah, 2-year job interview. All right. Thanks so much for listening, everybody. We had a great time chatting.
Man, we need a part 2.
We need a part 2. We had a great time chatting about No Way Home. Check us out next time. Look out for episode, part 2 of visual effects in No Way Home. And we'll maybe expand the discussion. We'll talk about some characters next time in No Way Home, but we'll expand the discussion to talk about Spider-Man Homecoming and Spider-Man and some other Spider-Mans, Far From Home, No Way Home. So we can talk about the John Watts trilogy.
Maybe even when Multiverse comes out. In end of March or May? No, it's May.
April or May when Doctor Strange comes out. I'm really excited for that.
May, yeah.
May, okay.
May 3rd or 7th or something like that. On IMDb, I'm pretty sure. So we'll see what happens. We'll probably time it with the release of Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. We can kind of have a big discussion there, and who knows, this will become our own trilogy of episodes, but we'll kind of sprinkle it out. So so as I said at the beginning of the episode, Framework's available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. You can check out our social media. We are on Instagram. We haven't really spread it out, but hopefully by the time this episode comes out, we've got more content on our Instagram. It is a YouTube show, so if you want to watch and comment and engage, check us out on YouTube. Email is rcepodcast@gmail.com. rcepodcast@gmail.com. I have said it incorrectly before. There's no S at the end of podcast. Have a good evening, Elmo. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll talk again very soon.
Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to it. Yeah.